We continue our work here with solving linear equations. And just do a review of the strategy for solving linear equations. Your first step is going to be that you're going to simplify each side of the equation as much as possible before you start to move terms around, okay? That may involve you using the distributive property to remove parentheses and combining like terms. Then we're going to aim in step 2 to combine all the variable terms on one side of the equation. Usually we will be using an addition or subtraction to move terms from one side to the other. And in step 3, we will collect all the constant terms, all the terms with no variables, to the other side of the equation by using addition or subtraction. Step 4, we're going to make sure that the variable on the coefficient is a 1, and usually that involves a multiplication or a division. And at this point, we should have the solution to the equation. So let's go ahead and state it. And finally, step 5 is checking the solution. And we check the solution by substituting the solution into the original equation to make sure we have a true statement. Now, in this video, we are going to be dealing with multi-step equations. So our first example, you can see we have distributive property that's going to need to be used on the left-hand side first before we can start moving terms around. So I'm rewriting here. So we will use our distributive property on the left-hand side first. We'll distribute the 4 in the parentheses, and I like to put these arcs to help me. And 4 times 5x is 20x, and 4 times 3 is 12. And now we're ready to move the constant terms together. So we have this 12 on the left and the negative 28 that's going to be on the right-hand side. And since we want to isolate the x, and our x is on the left-hand side, let's subtract 12. Let's use that subtraction property to subtract 12 from both sides of the equation. So on the left, we have 20x. And on the right-hand side, we have a negative 40. Now our next step is to get a 1 coefficient here in front of the x, and right now we have a 20. So that means we're going to divide both sides of the equation by 20. So that's our division property. Here we now have x, 1x, and on the right-hand side we have a negative 2. So negative 2 is our solution, and we can check that by substituting back into the original. 4 times 5 times 2 plus 3, and we want to see if we get a negative 28. Oh, and my solution's a negative 2, so let me put the negative there. Okay, working inside out with the parentheses and our order of operations, we're going to go ahead and do this multiplication first for the check. And so we have negative 10 plus 3, and then we're going to do the addition inside the parentheses next. And so that's a negative 7. And then we're going to do the multiplication here. And 4 times negative 7, which is negative 28, is good check. Okay, so in our next equation, we once again have parentheses here on the left-hand side, where we're going to have to start by using the distributive property. The 4 gets distributed by what's inside the parentheses and not beyond that, as you know. So we're going to get here 4x minus 12. And then we have a minus 6 and a minus 3x, all on the left side of the equation. So our next step is going to be to combine the like terms. And we have some like terms, don't we? We have the 4x here with the negative 3x. So we're going to go ahead and add those together. And 4x minus 3x is 1x. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? And then we have these other like terms, don't we? We have the negative 12 and the negative 6. Okay? And we're going to go ahead and add those two on the left-hand side. So x minus 18 equals 17. So notice what I did there. I went ahead and simplified everything on the left before I started to move things around the equations. And sometimes my students get confused with adding the opposite to move things around, and they may get their signs wrong. So if you're very methodical about just making sure you combine those like terms on the left-hand side, like the 4x minus 3x to a 1x, then you might lessen the chance of getting confused with your signs. Okay, so that's a big tip. Now we're going to go ahead and add that 18 to both sides so that we can get the x on its own on the left. And so we get x equals 35. Well, let's check this. So as you can see here with my check, I went ahead and substituted 3 in, and I did order of operations with the parentheses, did the multiplication, subtraction, and it does check to 17. Okay, problem number 7. Well, first of all, let's look at that right-hand side. That's going to be an easy fix, right? 2 plus 8 is 10. So we're going to go ahead and add those together. But on the left-hand side, I want you to remember that multiplication goes before subtraction. So this parenthesis here, we've got to do this first before we even look at this first 6 over here, okay? So don't fall for that. That's a little bit of a trap there. So we're going to go ahead and distribute the -6. I like to take this sign with it. I'm going to make a plus and just tuck in that negative there with the 6 so that when I distribute, my signs will be correct. Okay, so rewrite this 6 because we're going to take care of that later. And then we're going to multiply -6 times x, which is -6x, and -6 times 7, which is -42. And then you have this plus 7x that was already there. Now let's look at like terms on the left-hand side. We've got 7x and a -6x. So we're going to do that first. That gives us a 1x. And then we also have the 2 constants, right? The 6 and the -42. So that's going to give us a -36. And that equals to 10. So now we have to isolate this x, which means we're going to add a 36 to both sides of the equation here. And we get x equals 46. Let's check that because, I don't know, that looks kind of big. So I'm going to write the check here. Okay, so I've written here the check, and you see that I went ahead and substituted 46 in, added inside the parentheses first to get a 53, and then multiplied 6 times 53 to get 318. So I get 6 minus 318. 7 times 46 is 322. And so notice that we do get the 10 here. Okay, number 8. In number 8, we don't have parentheses, but we do have, do you notice the difference? The new thing that's added in number 8 that we didn't have before? If you said there are variables on both sides of the equation, you are right. If we could have looked at each side of the equation separately and combined terms first, we would do that. That's still going to be our first step to simplify. But since we can't, then the next step is let's get those x variables together on one side of the equation. A lot of my students like to put the x's on the left-hand side, although it doesn't matter because it's an equation. But let's go ahead and move to the left-hand side this time. And you'll see why, because the -8x here, we're going to add 8x to both sides so that we can get a 0 on the right. And then, so we'll just have that -3. And then we will go ahead here and combine these terms to get a 2x minus 7. And now we have the variables together on the left-hand side. So then our next step, of course, is to move the -7 over with the -3. So we will go ahead and add a 7. And now we get 2x equals 4. And our coefficient, we need to make that a 1. So we're going to divide both sides by 2. X equals 2. Okay, so for this problem, we have to first simplify that left-hand side, right? And you probably noticed that you're going to have to do some distribution, right? So we're going to go ahead and distribute the -8 first. So that will be 1 plus 16p. And then -8 times a2 is -16. So be careful with this symbol. When you go to distribute, go ahead and take the negative with the 8 as you multiply. Okay, and then there's some like terms on the left-hand side. The 1 with the -16, you want to do that first before you start moving things around. So we get 16p minus 15 equals p minus 2. So now our two sides are as simple as they can be. the next step will be to get those p's together on the same side. So we have a 16p here and a 1p over here. We're going to go ahead and subtract the 1p from both sides. And that'll get those p's together. So here we get 15p minus 15 equals negative 2. Our next step will be to get those constants together on the right-hand side, right? Because we've got that negative 15 with that negative 2. So we're going to go ahead and add 15 to both sides. So we get 15p equals 13. And now we're going to get that coefficient of p to be 1. So we're going to divide both sides by 15. And p equals 13/15. Now this one's going to be a little bit tough to check because it's got all those fractions, right? So I'm going to show you how to check this on the graphing calculator if you have one of those available. But if not, then we would do the same check by substitution, right? And use your calculator to help you with the fractions. So I'm going to show you how to do this in the calculator if you have a key that's called the store key. You're going to store your solution 13/15 into a variable in the calculator, then use that the calculator variable to check your answers. So what we do first is we go ahead and put in our answer, which is 13 divided by 15. Then we hit the store key here and we store it into the variable x, which is up here. And then you hit enter. It's going to give you this decimal. Leave it alone. It's just telling you that you've stored your your value into x. Now I'm going to type the left side of the original equation into the calculator because I'm going to have it evaluate what we get when we substitute in this x that I just entered. And by the way, I could have used p, but there's an x key for the variable, so that's why I'm using the x key instead of the p. Okay, now I'm going to just go ahead and hit enter here, and it's telling me that the left hand side of my equation gives this decimal. Okay, so now I'm going to type in the right side of my equation, remembering x is our p, x minus 2. And what I'm checking for is that the two sides match each other. And do you see that in the calculator that we did get them both to match? So that means that our answer is correct, even though it looks so strange with that 13/15. So 13/15 is the solution to this problem. Let's try the next problem. Okay, in this problem, notice the difference here. We're going to have to distribute twice. So I'm just rewriting. So we're going to have to distribute the -6 on the left, and we're going to have to distribute the +7 on the right-hand side. So I'm going to just go ahead and concentrate on the left-hand side first, get that simple. So -6x minus 30 minus 8. And notice here we have these two like terms. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that while I'm here. -6x minus 38. Again, one of the errors that happen with students when they're solving these equations is sign errors. But if you at least combine these like terms first before you start to move things from one side of the equation to the other, you will minimize getting some of these signs incorrectly. So -6x minus 38 is our left-hand side. On the right-hand side, 7 times x is 7x minus 14 when we distribute the 7. Now we're going to, as you know, we're going to get these x terms on the same side of the equation, and we're going to do that by subtracting 7x from both sides so that I can move it to the left. Only because I like moving things to the left, although I don't. You could move to the right. You know that, right? That these are equivalent. But I'm going to go ahead and just leave it be -13x over here. And now we're going to get these two constants together. So now we will add a 38, both sides. I'm going to add a 38. Oh, let me put it here. So I get -13x, and then I have a +38 with a -14, which gives me a 24. This is looking ugly again, isn't it? Okay, and now we're going to divide both sides by -13. And so our answer is x equals -24/13. And that looks pretty ugly. So we're going to go back to the calculator to use our store key and check it there. Okay, here we go. I'm going to type in my fraction, store it in x. Then I'm going to type in the left side of the equation. I'm going to enter that in using my x. Okay, that's what I get on the left side. Let's see if we get the same thing on the right side, because if we don't, then we've got an error. Okay, those two match. So our solution is x equals -24/13. Well done.